of an engagement right to the leadership of the insurgency, of course on appropriate terms, whereby they have a chance to come into the Afghan political system.
Do you think the Taliban that you speak to, you hear about, want to engage in this process after what's happened this year? A very bloody summer and also a flawed election process?
The good news is that there are people who are involved in the insurgency who have their version of the kind of debate that we've had in Western countries over the past few months, who are well aware of the costs imposed on Afghanistan by sustaining the conflict, who are well aware that Pakistan, that they consider to be a friendly neighbour, is being destabilised by the conflict, and they want to bring this thing to an end. The bad news is that currently they've got a weak hand inside the insurgent movement, while the message that was being put around by the hawks inside the insurgency is that the Americans aren't serious, they're getting out, we're about to win, stick with it, brothers, and we'll topple the government. So, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best things that you can do to help progress on reconciliation and peace is to make sure that those hawks inside the insurgency decisively lose that argument. That it should be absolutely clear that nobody can topple the system which was put in place in Afghanistan by the Bonn process.
Najim Sethi, 12 to 18 months?
I see much of the same thing happening. Is this okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. More of the same, I suspect. It would have been a good thing if we'd known today what the American administration is going to do, what the new strategy is going to be. There are lots of ifs and buts. About 6 months ago, in conversations with very top-ranking Pakistani army officers, I got the distinct impression that they thought that America's dithering would worsen the situation, and that this would, from some point of view, be good from their point of view. Which is to say that the Pakistani military establishment is looking for a very key role in Afghanistan, which has not yet been given to them. And their assessment is that America is losing, and unless the assessment changes to America is going to win this war, I'm afraid it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Pakistanis have, distributed the Taliban as there are Afghan Taliban, there are Pakistani Taliban, and then there is Al-Qaeda. The Pakistani military establishment will not help America vis-a-vis the Afghan Taliban. I'm absolutely sure of that. And I think that's where the problem is going to be. The minute America takes action against the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistanis are going to try and, they're going to start screaming and saying this is having an adverse impact on us. Something Mike just referred to. So I rather suspect that without bringing Pakistan on board in terms of the solution rather than the problem, it's going to be very difficult to make headway in Afghanistan. The Pakistanis are determined to protect their assets, as they call them. And the Americans are determined to take out those assets. If American strategy now extends into Waziristan, North Waziristan, and then maybe even into Balochistan, then I think there's going to be a disaster in the offing, because the Pakistani military establishment will whip up the nationalist Pakistani media, and the government of Pakistan may fall. That is how bad the situation could get. Already, the military establishment is saying that the government of Pakistan is soft on America, soft on India, and that this is not the position to take. The Pakistanis are now saying that we were supporters of the war on terror, now we are players. Now we are the principals, or one of the principals. We need to sit in on the review, and that has not yet happened. So I think the Pakistani military establishment will be looking out very closely to see the steps that the Obama administration takes. At the same time, I think they're determined to protect their assets. And I think that's where the problem is going to be. This, very briefly, the whole of Afghanistan and Pakistan could be destabilized, and all the American efforts there could be derailed if there is an India-Pakistan problem. If there is another Mumbai, everything is up for grabs. And that's the nightmare scenario.
When you talk about the Pakistanis want a role, you're talking about the military, or the military which, as everyone here knows who's been watching Afghanistan, they've had a long role in Afghanistan, or are the military and civilian walking in step now?
You see, the Pakistani military has accused the Pakistani government of being soft, of doing everything the Americans want Pakistan to do. But the military is not listening. The military has a voice of its own, a mind of its own, and a strategic thinking of its own. And unfortunately, the Pakistani government is not the most efficient or good government in town, which is to say they're on the defensive. And you saw the reaction that was inspired by the military's criticism of the Kerry-Lugar bill. And I dare say the military is taking a very hard line. They expect, they think that America has been dithering. They think that America can't do without them. They think America needs them more than they need America. And as long as they are kept out of the table in the sense the concrete loop, they are not going to be part of your solution.
Okay, let me just get a sense of everyone gathered here. When we meet next year at the second Halifax International Security Forum, how many of you believe that you will have seen an improvement in the situation in Afghanistan? How many of you believe the glass is half full rather than half empty? Let's see some hands. And how many of you think that we'll be saying, oh dear, it's gotten worse? How many of you just don't know? Including the people who came up with the title for this panel, Transition to Well, there you go. Well, at least it gives, I always say in Afghanistan, you can't be optimistic or pessimistic. You have to be realistic. Let's take up the last of the comments made by Najim Sethi. And I'm going to go to John McCain. Because you believe absolutely there should be more troops sent, 40,000 is what General McChrystal has asked for. What about when the critics say, what's the point of sending 40,000 more troops until you deal with what's called the problem in Quetta? And we have now senior military officers saying this in the United States and saying it in Kabul. What's the point? We're just going to get more and more soldiers killed and the conflict's not going to be ended. Do you think they have to deal with the kind of issues that Najim Sethi has hinted at?
Obviously, to a large degree, we are dependent upon the Pakistani government and military to do their part on the other side of the border. They don't have to do a complete job. Second of all, I think it's important to remember that just a year ago, 8-9 months ago, many in this room predicted the collapse of the Pakistani government and military. It was in all the headlines, all the stories. I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now. They are operating in Waziristan with significant efficiency and in ways that most experts didn't predict. In Iraq, we had a problem with on the Syrian border and with the Iranians. In fact, they still have a problem with the Iranians. And the Iranians are also beginning to play in Afghanistan. So you don't have to have total and complete control on the other side of the border. The key to the surge is not what happens on the other side of the border. The key to the surge is to go in and provide an environment of security so that the people can then pursue the economic, political, all the other aspects of normal living. If you do what we did early years in Iraq, if you do what we did in the early years in Vietnam, where you go out and you kill bad guys, and then you come back to the base, and that night the bad guys come back in and kill the people that cooperated, you lose. And but I want to mention one other aspect of this issue. I am confident about the military's ability with 40,000 troops, or roughly so, to establish an environment of security, the ink blot, and then the rest of the process can move forward. And it's fraught with many of the difficulties that we've already discussed and will discuss during the remainder of the time. But I am now deeply concerned about the governmental side. We have, one of the unfortunate things about the process that we've gone through is the constant leaking of the deliberations that are taking place, including cables from our ambassador in Kabul saying that we don't need any surge at all. I mean, that was devastating, those revelations. So I'm not concerned about the ability of our military to establish the security environment. I am deeply concerned about the ability of developing a plan for the rest of it, the governance, the addressing of the training of the police, the participation of our allies. But also, I'm very worried about the situation with within our own embassy in Kabul. And that part of it, although the security element is vital as far as the beginning is concerned, you don't succeed without the rest of the equation being implemented as well. And I would suggest that perhaps one of the great stories that we will look back on is not just the leadership of General Petraeus in Iraq, but the partnership between General Petraeus and Ryan Crocker, who work together as an incredible team, and I think General Hillier would certainly agree, we're largely responsible for success by working so closely together. I haven't seen that in Kabul yet.
General Hillier, the other parts of the equation, as John McCain says, do they have to include what Michael Semple says, a meaningful peace process? When you were in office heading the armed forces, you had very strong words against the Taliban.
Well, I absolutely think they have to have a peace process that works effectively, and that when you talk about offering the Taliban an opportunity to come to the table, not the Taliban as an organization, but individuals within who actually maybe want to move away from the violence and the tearing up of the region, and maybe actually come to the political process and maybe actually change the country in that political process as opposed to at the end of a gun barrel. You know, back to what Senator McCain says here, I've never really had worries about our ability to contain the security situation given the right support, and the incrementalism really has challenged us on that side. So the surge, in my view, is fundamental here. It's absolutely essential. I have always had challenges and concerns and worries about our ability to help President Karzai build a government. I mean, God knows we criticize him lots, but how much do we really help him change what he's doing there? And so those two actions, surging in and fighting the corruption, getting effective in government, have got to be large and got to be visible going forward here to change the strategic context. But less visible, but probably far more important, is how Pakistan is going to behave. And as Najim says, I think the Pakistani government is going to be between a rock and a hard place. I mean, if you let the extremism and the control in the northwest frontier belong to the Taliban, it is only a matter of time before another incident like Mumbai occurs, and I'm not sure that peace in that Southwest Asia region could survive a second attack into India or one of the other neighbors from that side. So I said many times, if I had three priorities for Afghanistan, it would be Pakistan, 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 because there's where the solution lies.
Whether we've just heard from Najim Sethi, though, he's not optimistic that while the Pakistanis have moved against the Pakistani Taliban and Al-Qaeda, they have not touched the Afghan Taliban. They haven't touched Quetta. They haven't touched Waziristan. What do you say to that?
That we have to help them do that, and I think there's a relationship that has to be built over this next 12 to 18 months where the international community, and it has to be led by the United States of America. I don't think NATO brings the leadership in the kind of concentrated form that can change that dynamic. They have to help the government articulate what it is going to do in a very sensitive way, being very cognizant of what Najim describes as the sensitivities between the Pakistani military and their government. They've got to bring the economic vitality to help them change the ignorance and poverty that is in the northwest frontier, because they are the most dangerous things. And they've got to bring the assistance into the military also, so they can do the job throughout Pakistan to help secure their population, not just in the northwest frontier, but largely.
Would that help, Najim?
You know, Liz, General Musharraf has been going around America saying that America should not pull troops out. Fine. But the military establishment in Pakistan is now saying we don't want a troop surge. And the argument that they're giving is that a troop surge will lead to a backlash. The more America controls its problem in Afghanistan, the more it will become Pakistan's problem in terms of the backlash. That's where the whole situation is right now. So ideally, the military establishment would like the current status quo to remain, which helps them improve their own position in the bargaining. But since that's not going to happen, it's going to be a very tricky situation now. And I think you need to bring the Pakistanis into the loop, so that instead of seeing this as a threat to themselves, they see this as part of the solving of their problem as well. I think this troop surge is too little too late, but we've got to get on with it. And it's left this impression in that whole region that NATO, America don't have the will to fight. It's only a matter of time. Nobody wants to be on the losing side. They all want to hedge their bets. And so far, the Taliban have been winning. So you've got to change that perception. How do you do that?